I'm here, well, we're here today to talk about environmental issues, green issues in our industry. You know, the normal music industry out there, the whatever rock and roll industry, you know, the other side of the industry is quite proactive in green initiatives. I read something a couple years ago about Radiohead doing a whole analysis of their tour before it started to make the best show possible, but also have a show that had a very, the smallest impact environmentally, moving all this stuff and lighting, and it was really inspiring. And I don't like to see other musicians or other scenes ahead of our scene. I think we should be proactive with, you know, technology and, you know, just be looking forward. And so to me, being aware and conscious of environmental issues that affect my industry and touring and music have to be also important to everything else I'm thinking and talking about. So today we want to discuss, you know, how our scene can make a difference, and that starts at a very small individual level. Actually, it's all about small steps forward. And Alison's done a lot of research with her company, Julie's Bicycle, in touring with more traditional music, and we're going to see how what she's learned can help our industry take a small and hopefully then a big step forward in the environmental side of things. So, Alison.
Thanks very much, Richie. I thought I'd talk a little bit about Julie's Bicycle very quickly to give you a feel for what it does, and hopefully it'll give you an idea about what this part of the music industry can do as well. Just a quick thing, as Richie says, this is quite an emotive issue for a lot of people. When they first come across it, there can be a wide range of reactions, ranging from guilt to just don't want to know. There will be an opportunity to ask questions at the end, because there's lots of uncertainties and imponderables around this. Julie's Bicycle formed 4 years ago, very much from the music industry, from promoters, from the labels, from the venue owners and managers, who sat round thinking the answer for this is not just the big gig. In fact, it's not the big gig. It needs to be something different. So what we did was we pulled together, we did something quite unusual, which was to pull in some research from Oxford University to help us to find out what our real impacts were and actually root all the work that we were doing in science. And it was a very unusual relationship, it still is, between the music industry and between hardcore scientists. And actually, it's been really interesting and really, both communities have got a lot out of it, actually. Really enjoyed it. But what it did was essentially it told us what our impacts were, our environmental impacts were, and therefore what we needed to start really focusing on and really doing things about. And the biggest thing we identified really early on was the answer was not to put on the gig. That the artist is so often in the forefront of the message, and actually it's probably the worst response we can come up with as the first response, because it puts the artist in a position of huge exposure and very often reputational risk. Richie mentioned what Radiohead did, which was incredibly brave, but they've also, as many of you will know, they've come in for a great deal of criticism to the point where they're saying less and less and less about what they're doing. So what we wanted to do was to create a situation which gave the art and the artists as much support as they could, and that meant looking at the industrial supply chain that supports the artists. So since that time, we've worked a lot with promoters, with venues, with festivals, with labels, just working out in each of those sectors what needs to be done, developing a series of campaigns, creating the permission, if you like, to ask these very difficult questions and try and find some solutions. And interestingly, the music industry has really picked itself up and started to do something quite remarkable, quite quietly. The other thing we've said is don't talk about it unless you know what you're talking about, because we live in a very overexposed industry, and reputations, as I said, can be lost, and that's not just artists. So the labels, the festivals particularly, but then as I was talking earlier to Ben, festivals are a really rich area to start a lot of work. They've done a huge amount, much of which is unspoken. We are just now at a point where we're beginning to talk to artists, because actually artists in many ways are the most powerful part of the creative supply chain. But it's really making sure that artists know what they are asking for and that they're supported by the industry around them. And just to say something about Richie here, Richie got in touch with us a while ago and just basically wanting to know what to do. And we gave him some support, some resources, and they've gone away, him and Matthew, who we'll hear of in a minute, and they've done an incredible thing, which actually, as far as I'm aware, very few artists have done anywhere. And certainly, I don't think any club artists have done this, which is, I mean, I'll talk about it in a minute, but they've measured the environmental impacts of their tours, and they've started to use some green riders that we've given them some guidance on, and some club checklists, green checklists, and their ambition is very broad. So I think it's been a very interesting experience to see what can be done by one club artist. And who've gone for the jugular. They haven't gone for it just for brand, but they've gone for it in a sort of very hardcore way. We're going to bring in Matthew here, Richie's brother, who is a scientist, actually.
Yeah, that's, I have a very lucky situation. And I always feel if you have a situation, you have to take advantage of that. And my brother Matthew finished a degree in environmental studies a couple of years ago, and kind of kept poking me as he was learning and telling me things. And finally, over a glass of wine, I was like, okay, I've got to be more aware of my impact, and started to listen to him more. And he's really helped take the ball and helping not only myself, but also my label, M-nus, into making some really positive changes. And one of the things we did late last year was a US bus tour, which, just before Matthew comes on, it's one of the things that our industry is different than the regular touring industry. Most bands do bus tours and, have a quite regular touring schedule, driving, going from one place to another, one city to another city. Our scene is probably the most environmentally impactful scene there is. It's very typical for me and other DJs to jump on planes and do 2 gigs in a night, or Tokyo on Friday, then London on Saturday, and then Switzerland on Sunday. And flying around in planes is not one of the nicest things to do. So we had an opportunity to do a bus tour at the end of last year, and we just did some analysis, which I'll let Matthew talk about, and gives you a bit of an idea of where you can make a difference.
Yeah, well, just to give you a little background about my own sort of history with this. The reason that I sort of got interested in the environment, sort of 2006, 2007, and I was really kind of interested in my own art practice as a visual artist and my impact. And that sort of interest led me into joining a master's program at the University of Surrey. And over the next couple of years, I did a part-time master's there. And through that, I also met a PhD student, Catherine Petrelli, who would actually, she was actually doing orchestras at the time and their touring schedule. And just sort of a matter of coincidence was a few years later, I saw Catherine again, and she was then working for Julius Bicycles. And that's kind of how we all reconnected through Julius Bicycles. So in around, well, while I was studying, it was at this time when I was sort of prodding my brother to, I guess, to do more. And working with M-nus and having access to all the resources there, we felt that we could just take small steps and make some changes. I think one of the biggest changes we made was with the CD packaging.
That was one of the first, Julie's Bicycle put this great book out, report on the music industry, and some of the numbers that really came over shocking were just the amount of CO2 produced by making CDs. And the biggest part of the CO2 produced by manufacturing a CD is actually the jewel case. And so it was, quite an easy decision to say, well, why don't we just cut that out and go to all paper packaging and stop producing, wasting all this plastic, which, it's a no-brainer to me. I've still talked to a lot of other labels around in the industry and in the electronic industry, and it still doesn't seem to be widely adopted. You don't have to understand the numbers exactly, but you'll get, when we looked at a one-year production of 23,000 CDs, if we produce them in the old jewel cases, we would put into the atmosphere 27 tons of CO2. Okay, so what's 27 tons? Well, all I can tell you is when we switched to the new packaging, for 23,000 units, we went from 27 tons to 0.54 tons of CO2. So that's a massive impact. We still have beautiful CDs, they're not in plastic, that full art, and there is a very easy way for a record company to make a positive impact. And that was the beginning steps for us. Since then, we had to do a major server upgrade last year for our back-end servers, and we went from some old technology that was sucking 500 watts per day of power and costing us about 500 euros per year to run. And we updated the server and went to a $41 per year running cost at 94 watts per day. So, I'm lucky to have Matthew to do this, and help with this research. But we've engaged our people in the office at M-nus just to start thinking consciously about, where we can make, positive impact. And that's a very important point that Alison and I were talking about. I'm a DJ. I can't stop traveling around the world and flying. There's going to be damage that I do when I do my job. But where, which other parts of my job or my company or my life can we make an impact that kind of negates some of that negativity and makes a better balance than some of the other people out there? And that's what we're here to kind of talk about. Everybody can, look at their own unique individual situation and company or touring situation and make a difference. The tools and the people are out there with Julie's Bicycle and people like Matthew. And we hope to promote that idea of being a little bit more conscious.
I think the point is that when Richie and I were first talking about it, the issue of private jets came up very quickly. And not just private jets, but air travel. And the environment has been discussed very much as one of those things that you can do, you can't do. And it's been one of those subjects that has made people feel very bad often about what they do, and it actually stops them from doing anything. But what JB is based on is actually looking at each part that everybody can play, and actually using the power and the influence that you've got. And one of the things that we're looking at is making really big shifts, because a single artist can't do something on their own. They can only do the kind of stuff that Richie and Matthew have done together has been amazing, but it's not going to create that scale of shift. So what we're looking at is what are a small number of things that a large number of people can do. If all the artists got a green rider, then the industry would shift very quickly. If all the venues that people were playing in had an environmental policy, everything would shift really quickly. If we got rid of the plastic jewel case, which although CDs are leaving the industry slowly, there's still an awful lot of them around, and you can reduce your emissions by 99% just by doing that. If everybody did it we would shift the industry really rapidly. And I think that's what we're looking for. We're looking for these kind of bigger industrial shifts to actually really make a difference. And in that context, the music industry can take a real lead and is already taking a real lead. And I think there is an opportunity for the dance sector to start to take some of this leadership very seriously as well.
Yeah, we're also doing, Matt, maybe you want to talk about the Green Rider and also a little bit about the bus tour that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, well, I guess last summer when we were organizing the November bus tour, on previous bus tours, we had requested biodiesel, and we didn't measure that tour, but after talking to Julie's Bicycles and using their industry green measuring tool, we thought this would kind of be the best place to kind of measure. It was a 7-day tour through Canada and the US. And so it kind of gave us, you know, a really, I guess, small but extensive way to just kind of see exactly the difference between using a bus and also flying. But along with that, Jewish Bicycles was also sort of piloting a project called the Green Rider. And, you know, every DJ has a rider, and so this is basically the sort of environmental green aspect, which can be used by anyone, basically. We did some small, you know, modifications to it, but so as well as measuring the tour, we sent out this Green Rider and the green checklist. So the Green Rider was sent out with sort of an introduction letter from Richie, just to kind of give the promoters a heads up, and it's sort of it's kind of geared towards the venues and the promoters and the managers, just kind of stating, you know, some general concerns about the environment, and it's more of just a kind of a tool to raise awareness. You know, are you recycling your plastic bottles? You know, what sort of public transportation are you offering your audience? You know, it's not necessarily telling them that they have to do it. It's more of a, you know, a way of kind of suggesting and you know, giving them sort of advice about, you know, what they could do. And then along with the Green Rider, there's also something called the Green Rider checklist, and this is more of a more detailed document which the venue fills out and sends back to Jewish Bicycles, or in this case, or ourselves. And it's sort of, the idea is to build a global database of venues using this, using the checklist. And it is sort of a way to help them measure, to help them kind of look more closely about their, you know, their power usage, their waste. You know, and from the 9, sorry, from there was not, sorry, 9, from the 9 venues, we had 2 replies. 2 people sent it back, which, you know, in the grand scheme of things isn't great, but it's certainly better than nothing. And it's just, you know, it starts a dialogue. From the from that piloting, from that tour, we are starting to put that rider in with all of Rich's gigs now. And, you know, it's hoped that, you know, over the summer when he's gigging the most, you know, we'll be able to get more of this information back. You know, the database will slowly grow, And, hopefully venues will start talking about this. If one DJ has this, then hopefully another DJ will pick this up too. In terms of the bus tour, we first did some estimates about the difference, between taking the bus and flying. And then once all the data was in, then I did sort of the final results. Again, I don't think it's necessary you need to know what a ton of CO2 of emissions is. But the results for the bus, where there's 15 tons of CO2 over the tour, and that sort of takes into account the traveling, the hotels, and also some of the power usage. So using the bus, we found there was 15 tons of CO2. And
I was wondering when the internet would crap out on us here.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, you're back.
And so the total for the flying was 19 tons. So you've got a difference of 3 tons, which is quite considerable. But also where we also checked was the actual the expense of the tour, and by using the bus, we saved about $5,000 as well, which is a pretty significant amount. And in the sort of the grand scheme of things, you've saved money, you've lessened your environmental impact, you've lessened travel times to and from airports. Obviously not everybody does bus tours, but from this data, we hope that we can make better, even more better decisions, I guess, for future tours.
Yeah.
And sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to pick up. Can I?
Yeah.
I think, again, these numbers, unless you know all about CO2, may not make sense. But what you can see is that each of the numbers are going down. Not only the amount of CO2 we're putting into the atmosphere by CDs or by touring on a bus tour, but we're also actually saving money, and or even at some cases with CDs actually making more profit. So on every level, on these levels, it makes total business and conscious sense. And that's, again, the thing that I guess I want to drive home. We were talking about private jets before, in the back room. There's some gigs in the summer where, to do my 2 or 3 gigs on the Saturday night, I have to do a private jet, or I don't do those gigs. I think it's important for my career to do those gigs, so I have to do that. Every time I take a private jet, I'm putting out double the amount of CO2, actually, 60% more than if I was taking a regular flight. So, I feel pretty bad when I'm doing that, but I also then can find a way through these other initiatives where I can make even more of an impact, and that's the balance we're trying to stay. It's quite daunting to get into this, but once you get things rolling, there's a lot of simple things you can do, and I really, I hope that as a industry, the electronic industry, can kind of band together. I feel we're in a better place than the other music industries to get further faster, because we're already like a cottage industry. A lot of the DJs here are their own managers. A lot of the DJs are running their own labels. So it's not like there's multi-layers to go through and make these initiatives happen. One person in this room can make a decision on that hits on numerous levels and takes a step forward. And if a number of us can do that, it can really quickly move our own small industry forward.
I think that's absolutely right. I mean, one of the things that we've done recently is look at money savings, and they're huge. That if you just, it's common sense, if you just stop using so much energy either, because you use it more efficiently or you swap your energy sourcing. We worked out that the music industry could save about 35 million very quickly, just simply by using energy sensibly. But the other thing I think that Richard was talking about this industry is that we've had, it's been quite hard work, our work with and very the music industry is, as you know, very fragmented. It's full of gatekeepers all the way through, particularly agents and managers. And actually, this industry, this part of the industry is much more direct. And it's also, interestingly, the artists that you've got just go on and on and on. They have long careers and a huge fan base. And I think that there's a real opportunity with that to be in it for the long game. I mean, what we haven't talked about, and I'm not going to because it very often puts people off, but the seriousness of the issue we haven't discussed at all. And one of the things that we know is that it's here and it's here to stay, and we have to deal with it. And outside the music industry, many multinationals and corporates are dealing with it, and it's very mainstream. And they're making a lot of money out of it as well, not just through efficiencies, but through investing in new gear. And there's a massive opportunity that generally isn't talked about around how we can respond to it and start to invest in it and develop a business model that it goes beyond digital and actually talks about environmental impacts, because we are going to have to pay for them in the next few years. They're either going to come through taxes, definitely through raised airfares, but also the environmental impacts in our merch, in our goods and services. All these prices are going to go up. So we need to tackle them now, and we need to think what our business is going to look like in the next 5, 10, 15 years. So I think that Richie, obviously there's an ethical, there's a conscious commitment there, but there's also a very sensible business commitment. He's saving money, and he's also looking to the future to how he's going to remodel how he works his world. And I think one of the things that we'd like to talk to you guys about is whether or not there is what people feel about it themselves, how this, because it's a new subject here, it's not something that has been discussed much, really, no. And what you know, if there are anxieties or ideas or thoughts from you guys about how it might work in your industry.
Yeah, like we were talking today about how our industry is growing like never before. You know, from what I heard this morning, the electronic scene and electronic genre is going to take over the world. So if we are going to take over the world, which would be great, it would be, now is the time to make sure we take over the world and set a good example also. So, you know, I don't know, maybe it's also interesting to hear if there's anyone out there who has any comments or questions about this, or, you know, wants to, you know, it's, you know, when I started doing this, the first thing I did was starting to offset my flights with a company in Germany, in Berlin, called Atmosphere. And so for every mile I fly, I put some money aside to them, and they invest this money into projects in Africa, taking communities from gas lamps to LED lighting and things which can make an impact. And you know, I was hoping that if I did this and then I got a couple of my friends and agents, you know, into the idea, it would really move very fast, but it moved very, very slowly. So, you know, I've had a lot of blank stares at me when I've been talking about this, and I hope there's not as many blank stares now, and there's a couple of questions or even just comments about the thoughts on this. You know, can we make a difference? You know, do people think we can make a difference?
It is worth saying, just though, without getting too despondent, that since we started, we've now been asked, and we are now working with the theatre industry, with fashion, with the visual arts, a little bit of work with screen and film, and we're also being asked to work all over the world. There's a huge appetite out there, and that's another reason for actually being ahead of the curve, is that this has happened, and it really has happened. It's past tense. Now it's just about how we start to apply it in our professional environments. So it's not all bad. There's a lot of people, loads of people doing stuff.
Supposed to be optimistic today.
Yeah. Does anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask?
I think there's someone at the back already.
Yeah, sorry. Listen, I just want to say thanks very much for bringing this up. 3 years ago, I was asking DJs those questions, and I was getting blank stares. I'm a writer, and just in terms of DJs were getting really uncomfortable when I said to them about environmental impact of your flights and stuff like that. Do you offset? And they kind of didn't know how to answer the question. So I was saying to them, like, is there any imaginary things that you're doing, and I'd like to ask you this, Richie, in terms of yourself as a DJ, where you will get to the point where you're maybe doing virtual shows, or, you know, where you aren't traveling, and so, yeah.
Yeah, that was definitely one of the first things we talked about. 2 weeks ago, we flew to Japan for 1 day. I felt it was the correct thing to do because we wanted to go to Japan to support the idea that people at this point should visit Japan because of tourism is down and because of a lot of bad media speculation of that it's dangerous to go there. So we decided to go there. But when we got there, we also did a Ustream broadcast, and we had more people online listening and watching to the show than the people in the club, and the club was completely packed. So I definitely see that being more of an option in the future. But I also feel this is one of those things where I'm pulled and pushed between ideas and possibilities, because with the digitization of the world, with YouTube and people being able to experience everything without actually being there physically, I do feel that it's more important for me to be physically in places than ever before, you know. So I do see myself continuing to fly to Japan and London and Sao Paulo just as much as I did in the past, at least for the foreseeable future, until a virtual, Hawtin is as good as the real thing. So, but you know, I also do see that we will augment in doing some live streams. So that's just stepping back. So that's an example. I feel I need to be physically at these places, which means I need to fly, which means I'm making damage. So I'm going to leave that there. Let me focus on an area where I can make a difference.
Can I just add to that? I think it's a really important question, because actually what it's asking is, where are we going? But I also think that it applies to every part of what we do. The live experience is irreplaceable. And actually, what we can't do is say we have to stop the live experience it's a hugely thriving and a massively important part of what we do. So we have to work with it. I mean, the best festival is a festival that doesn't happen. That's the sort of ultimate end of that question. What we do need to do is look at business modelling for the future, though, and I think digital offers some answers there.
Question?
Okay, here we go. I just want to say I think what you're doing with your company is great, and I think you're setting a really good example for people and also for the music industry. And I was just curious about your Green Rider, and I was wondering if you'd go into a little more detail about what is actually on these Green Riders.
The Green Rider is really just talking about how the club is, do they have an environmental mandate? Are they thinking about that? If so, what it is? What their power usage is, asking for, especially at larger shows when you're doing a sound check and, say like a Contact show or Plastic Men show, are you leaving everything on for those 8 hours, between sound check and performance? All these little things of power consumption. It's when we did the Contact shows 4 years ago, we were using a lot of normal par cans and lamps, and when now we're doing the Plastic Men shows, we're using not only on the LED panels, but all the lights above are also LED lights, which use about the 1/10 of the power of traditional lights. So being aware of those things, asking the promoter, how they're getting rid of, garbage, how people are getting to the show. Do they offer information on the flyers about car sharing? Things like that. It's a great example of a festival just outside of Berlin called the Melt Festival. And they have, it's thousands of people coming to this festival. You have to drive there. And there's a train there. And they were like, well, it would be much better on an environmental level if more people took the train. But everybody wants to carpool. Nobody really wants to go on the train. So they actually booked some of the artists and some of the DJs on the train and made that like kind of a special VIP ticket. And suddenly the train's packed and everybody's having a good time and saying, hey, can I get on the train next year? So, that they probably, I don't know what they charged for that. They probably made money. They made it a positive impact, and everybody had a fun, even probably had a higher, heightened the experience of that weekend for people. Because at the end of the day, it's entertainment. We want people to have a good time, go home smiling, and want to come back to the next show. So you got to balance all these little things in your head.
And there's lots of examples of that, of festivals particularly looking at incentives. Punishment doesn't work, but incentives do. And I mean, Ben's doing some stuff with festivals that's some really interesting stuff. And just to reiterate, the point about the riders is that if you just ask the questions, the more people that ask the questions, the more likely it is that we can really shift things quickly. So it's little things that really matter. Yeah, we're not. The rider doesn't say if you don't do this, we're not coming. We're coming. The gig's booked, but please, give us some information back. What are you doing about that? Because again, it's about bringing awareness. That's the first step.
I was wondering, all the things you've been talking about, all the actions you've been taking have been very focused on CO2 emissions. I'm just wondering if you've done much research into the negative impact on the environment from some of the actions that you're taking.
The negative impact, not really. Like I was just reading a research on this new solar array that's going outside California, and there's a huge push against this array because of the negative impacts in the environment to the actual power that's coming. So we're happy right now to have enough people looking over this, myself and Matthew, to be sure that we're making as much of a positive impact as possible. Can I also say something about CO2, which is that CO2, the shorthand for carbon dioxide, and CO2 and its equivalents is a very, very good proxy. It's the best proxy we've got for a much greater range of environmental impacts. And CO2 itself is a proxy that's used for things like ocean acidification, for the loss of biodiversity, for soil erosion. So actually CO2, in many instances, it's a shorthand for a much, much broader range of environmental issues.
Hello, my name is Ingmar Loh from Greenheart Music. We got a record company since 5 years with investors from Chicago, Madrid, and Ibiza. And our idea was to create a company where musicians promote their ideas for in a combination between music and nature. And we run against a lot of doors because we had this, but you try to do something good for nature, but why you produce CDs and things like this. And we thought about a lot of this packaging and things, and our main aim is to create awareness. I mean, when I buy a liter of milk, it's packaged in plastic. I can't change it, but at least I can try to buy some ecologic milk or whatever. It's the order. And I think this kind of tragic situation like Tokyo or whatever, they imply also something very positive, because people are getting more and more aware of ecological lifestyle. And so I'm quite happy that you doing this kind of statement and going this direction, and I think it will lead always to something better. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think there's also, like I said earlier, I looked at some other DJs or colleagues who kind of stared at me blankly about what we were doing, and some people question CO2. There's some people who don't believe in that angle, but everybody has to take their own initiative, do a little bit of research, and find your own way which you feel comfortable and happy that you're doing your own step forward. And these are examples of what people could do that work for me as a traveling musician and as on a record label with M-nus. But these aren't only the ways, and I think everybody is a slightly different case study, but it's about being conscious and just thinking a little bit more, And I think the scene's growing up. we're all growing up. I've been in it 20 years. I'm not looking out at a bunch of 21-year-olds who are going out, 5 nights in a row without sleeping. Sometimes, but not as much as we used to. And I think we have families. We're looking towards the future, and this is part of the future. This is where our scene can make a positive future for the next music generation.
Hello, my name's Seth. As a music consumer, like a person on the street, what's the most immediate thing you can do? Like stop buying CDs, stop buying vinyl, just buying digital files?
No, it's just I'll just quickly say digital is a bit better than CDs, but digital is all about how you use it. This is if you've got your tracks on multiple MP3 players and you can use digitally carefully or not. Actually, it's a very difficult relationship, but if you were to just download once or stream once, then it would be a much, much, much better system. This will change because Google, I don't know if any of you noticed, but Google is investing massively, massively, massively in solar. And once it's based on renewable energy, yes, it will be the definitely straightforward answer. But I think as a music consumer, it's the same actually as an artist. It's about making choices. You can go to a venue and you can ask for an environmental policy. You can ask what their performance is as easily as an artist. You can travel to a venue more sustainably than in other ways. I mean, we're all making these choices on an individual level as well as a collective level. So yeah, I think there's lots you can do. We've got one more question, I think.
What about you? You care about ecology, and do you think about people which produce these CDs and lose job in the future? Somebody think about them?
Yeah, that's like, I think a lot of producers of vinyl and CDs don't like me anyway because of my involvement with Final Scratch. But my stance on that is that the whole world is moving towards a more conscious place. And on every level, businesses need to be more conscious and look towards how their business develops. And so if the world is moving away from CDs or jewel cases, then it's not up to me to tell them how to adapt. They should look at what we want as a label, as a business, and adapt their business to be both financially viable in the future and also consciously viable in the future. Well, I think that's our time up. So I'd like to thank Alison and Matthew and for joining us all together. And hopefully you guys can think a little bit about what we talked about and together make some small steps that could be a huge impact from the electronic music scene. Thank you very much.
If you're interested, could you let us know if you want to take this forward, perhaps either Richie or me or Ben or something, because we really do want this to happen. It's a very powerful group, and JB and the work that Richie's done, we're here to support anything that you might want to start doing. And online at juliesbicycle.com have incredible resources and white papers that are very easily downloaded and read on the plane to learn a little bit more and see where you can make a difference. That's where, Matthew pointed me in the beginning, and that was our first step. So hopefully you can make a step with us.
Thank you, Alison, Richie, and Matthew.